Wide receiver drama in the NFL. 49ers receiver Brandon Aiyuk requesting a trade officially. What about Davante Adams? Could multiple stars be on the move before training camp in 2024? All that and more from the Peacock and Williamson mailbag.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we appreciate all of our everydayers out there, especially those that are subscribed. And many of you are not, even though you're listening, viewing every day. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Helps us out a lot on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. Today's episode of P&W brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. Sports stop sporting like we want them to. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right. We are digging into the mailbag here as we do every single week. You can always get those questions into us on Twitter at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL or drop a question in the YouTube comments. Matt, we are going to start with the biggest story of this week, which is San Francisco 49ers wide receiver Brandon Aiyuk officially requesting a trade from the Niners due to an inability to get a long-term contract done throughout this entire offseason now that we're about a week from reporting to training camp. Michael's question on Twitter, does Aiyuk suit up week one for the 49ers? Is it a mystery team or is he just holding out and still a member of the 49ers? And I think
how do you field that one to start? I'm curious. What do you think? Okay.
So I think he'll be a 49er. I have a lot of opinions about how this should go, how it will go. I've always maintained that the 49ers long-term plan, and, maybe the money is in a different place now than it was to start the offseason, and maybe their plans changed. I think the plan was for Brandon Aiyuk to get an extension, have one more mega team this year, try to go win that Super Bowl. The next offseason, Deebo Samuel would be the trade chip because Brandon Aiyuk is a better intermediate receiver. That's where Brock Purdy has shined. He's got a really good rapport with Brandon Aiyuk. Brandon Aiyuk is younger. His body has taken less of a toll. He's more likely to age better than Deebo Samuel, even besides being a couple years younger on top of it. So the long-term play is Brandon Aiyuk, I think, for the 49ers, better on all three levels of the field as a receiver, even though Deebo Samuel's such a special guy with the ball in his hand.
Sure.
And then I would think that the 49ers would say, okay, well, let's even transition now Christian McCaffrey into a wide back role, throw him the ball even more, save his body, and do some Deebo stuff with him, and utilize some other running backs to smash their brains into the two defensive linemen and in those type of roles, running the football and closing out games. And so that's the vision I have for the 49ers. I have a feeling that's kind of what their soft plan was, but they also love Deebo. And so if things go south, they have other options. And has it gone so far south that they don't get a deal done? I don't know if that's the case. I tend to think the timing of this trade request is odd from Brandon Aiyuk. This is something that I would have expected before the draft, which would have made it much more likely that Aiyuk was traded. So since he wasn't traded before the draft, I thought it went from like a, 25% chance that he was traded, or probably lower, to basically a 0% chance that he was going to get traded this year. Because here's the thing with trading Brandon Aiyuk. He's already under contract. He's not going to miss game checks, I wouldn't imagine. He's not going to become a free agent after this year if he doesn't show up at all year and just holds out all year. And the 49ers would be getting 2025 draft picks anyway, so you could still tag and trade him next offseason.
Yeah.
So there's no reason to trade away a really good player in your Super Bowl run if you're not going to get anything to help your current Super Bowl run, I don't think you'd get much different of a trade return. And even if, let's say, you got a second rounder instead of a first, that's worth going for a Super Bowl run and keeping that player and getting a little bit less in a tag and trade scenario next offseason, and then just keeping, Deebo from there. And then you have Ricky Pearsall developed. So for that reason, I do think that Brandon Aiyuk is going to be with the 49ers. Does he hold out into the season? I don't know. It's not likely. Doesn't happen a lot. So I would say likelihood he suits up week 1. Number 2 would be a holdout to the very early part of the season. Maybe he misses the first week and then they figure something out, or he just shows up and plays under his 5th-year option. And then I would say the trade and the mystery team is still a distant third likelihood of him getting traded. And I will say one more thing about the trade request and the timing of it now. I think it actually makes it more likely that he signs in the next week to 10 days.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because I think this just is signals in, as far as negotiations go, this is the last lever that Brandon Aiyuk and his agent have to pull before finally caving and getting a deal, trying to inch the 49ers a little bit closer. So if the reports are true that Niners offering 26, Aiyuk wants 30, it's 28.5 has always been the number anyway. So sign the sneaking deal. And I think this is just the last ditch from their side to try to get things a little bit closer. Deadlines make deals. Camp starts 2 days after camp starts. Brandon Aiyuk signs. So I think it actually, in some ways, even though it doesn't seem like it on the surface, it might actually signal that it's more likely that a new deal is coming because Brandon Aiyuk's side is ready to do something.
I agree with everything you said. And I think that's been the Niners' plan all along. And one thing I think we can't forget about that you're aware of, but we need to mention, is not only did they draft Pearsall, but they also used a 4th-round pick on a receiver and extended Jennings, who I know they like quite a bit, and you got a Purdy contract looming as well. So all the receiver moves, signings, etc., scream that both their top guys won't be there next year or for long, in some way, shape, or form. But what has changed since they probably put this blueprint together, though, is we've seen a lot of wide receiver signings. And maybe that is up the ante, or maybe that has made the distance between both parties wider than they expected,
And even so, there was, and we've been talking about this on Locked On 49ers since the beginning of the offseason. Get this deal done early. Get it done before Justin Jefferson. We still haven't seen the CD Lamb contract, by the way. So it's not like Brandon Aiyuk's the only player from that same first-round draft class in 2020 that hasn't got his extension signed either. So there's other negotiations going on. This isn't like a super weird thing for a big contract not to be quite done yet a week before training camp. Mm-hmm. As upset as it seemed like Brandon Aiyuk is compared to some of the other receivers. But there was other contracts that you didn't even expect to see, like the Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle, who are a year behind those guys from the 2021 first round. And those extensions got done. Yeah, Nico. So it kind of raised it up. And Brandon Aiyuk talked about this a little bit on a podcast with Ryan Clark, the Pivot podcast, and Fred Taylor and those guys. And basically he's like, yeah, I mean, my position is stronger than it was to start the offseason because the money has gone up since then. And
he's right.
You can see it coming a mile away. So if the 49ers thought they should be in one spot as far as money goes, and that was $26 million, they should know that they have to come up because it's not the same market as it was in February.
Mm-hmm. And I can see that being the sticking point. We kind of put our foot in the ground. We think you're worth this, and the offer's on the table. And he says, but the market says I'm worth more than that. So here we are, stand up.
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Yep. 100%. So do you want to talk about options?
Yeah. So if you're putting your GM hat on, like what do we think this could be? Let's say that it's irreconcilable, and the 49ers, having drafted a couple of wide receivers, by the way, Ricky Pearsall, the rookie first rounder, on the NFI list. So he's a minor injury, but apparently he's showed up to training camp and he's not quite ready to go full go because of a springtime injury, minor injury. But if he comes, if let's say Aiyuk was gone for the first week of training camp, and every beat reporter that's out there is like, wow, Ricky Pearsall is unbelievable. And he is so good. And by the way, he was an older prospect, right? 5th-year senior, 24 years old. This guy looks like a pro already. Maybe the 49ers would say, okay, maybe he's more ready for 2024 rather than 2025 like we thought. Like most wide receivers take a little bit of time. Maybe that would make it easier for the 49ers to listen to some offers. I don't know. But at this point, Pearsall now on the NFI list to start. So he won't be at least taking part this week as rookies report early.
Okay. So I think because it's the topic of the day, we need to discuss the half dozen teams or so that could make some sense. Should we do that on the other side and kind of dig into it? All right.
Let's get in that a little bit deeper. And Brandon Aiyuk's not the only wide receiver. If anybody who watched the receiver doc on Netflix, Davante Adams, what about him? Is there potential movement not only for Brandon Aiyuk, but maybe even Davante Adams for a wide receiver needy team? Could we have some blockbusters shake up the NFL world here in summertime before the 2024 season begins? We'll get into those questions. Quinn Meinerz, big contract, and more questions from the mailbag next. This episode, Peacock and Williamson, brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. I love sports. You love sports. Matt loves sports. That's why you're all listening to this podcast, because you love sports. You love them so much you never want them to stop. You get the all-star break. It's one of the few times in the calendar year of sports where there's not a lot of games going on. You still get Major League Baseball now in the second half of the season, though. And FanDuel's helping you out this summer, making it easy, opening up the app and dreaming up bets anytime you are in the mood, including tons of bets on the 2024 NFL season, NFL props. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long at FanDuel, including props like over-under on rushing yards for players, receiving yards for players, passing yards, MVPs, Super Bowl winners, and tons more. All you got to do is head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. That is FanDuel.com. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So what's the list, Matt? Who's calling the San Francisco 49ers? Because as reported by Adam Schefter, teams have called, and so far the 49ers have said, no, we're not trading him.
So first off, if I'm the Niners, I don't know that any of these teams would be interested, but I am not trading them to the Cowboys, the Lions, the Eagles, direct competitors. Probably not the Chiefs either, right? Yeah. Direct competitors. I was thinking NFC, but yeah, Chiefs are their own scary animal, the scariest animal.
I mean, how bad would that be? You trade Aiyuk to the team that beats you in the Super Bowl for the second straight year, and they actually throw him the ball. Because that was one of Aiyuk's things. He showed after the Super Bowl loss, he showed his jersey. It was completely clean. And that's one of the big things is like, one more thing before we get to those teams. With Aiyuk, he's an interesting player because he's clearly really good. You look at Matt Harmon's reception perception, his route success is lit up green like a Christmas tree. Every route is green. He's successful all areas of the field. He's a really good player, and he's developed quite a bit. Good blocker as well.
Easily a top 10 receiver, maybe top 5. Like that's the neighborhood he's really in my opinion.
And he's not the most featured weapon in the 49ers offense just because they have so many, and the 49ers don't run a lot of plays and in fact passed 32 out of 32 teams as far as volume. So it's not a high volume passing game for the 49ers. And he's many times the backside player. He's so good at it. That also helps him though, too. So being in that offense with all those weapons, he's not the first player that defensive coordinators are trying to stop in that offense. You get a lot of heavy boxes against the 49ers, which means more space to operate. So he's also helped by it. So one of the things that I see people do is like, oh, he's so amazing. Imagine if he was on another team. Well, his efficiency would, no matter what, as good as he is, go down.
Oh, efficiency, yes.
So it's not like, because he had 75 catches, like 1,300 yards. Yeah. So volume go up, efficiency go down. Mm-hmm. And so he is helped. He is really good, but also helped by being on this 49ers team. Kyle Shanahan, the way Purdy operates in the intermediate game, and that's where he's good too. It's like it all comes together perfectly for him. When he's the featured guy, the guy that teams are trying to stop, it won't be quite as easy for Brandon Aiyuk. So I want to put that out there. That I think both are true. That it would efficiency go way down on a new team. It'll probably come down anyway because he was crazy efficient last year, and he's also very good.
So you want the list?
Who are the teams? Who's calling?
Okay. See, I think at the top of most people's, on the tip of people's tongues are my Steelers and the Commanders. We've seen this Commander connection, and I've said all along from a Steeler perspective, yeah, I'm interested in all kinds of receivers, but I can't give up next year's first round pick when I don't have a quarterback under contract next year. Like that's one thing I can't move. Between me and you and the millions and millions listening, I've kind of changed my tune on Aiyuk, though. I might give you the first. You know what I mean? Because he's that good. And the Steelers have so much cap space. You could go get Dak Prescott. I mean, and you could buy a quarterback.
So let's say it's a team like the Commanders.
Yeah.
And they can't trade a first because it might be a top 5 pick.
Yeah, I think that's a real problem.
And they also have pretty decent receivers. The Commanders connection's an interesting one. It's kind of Aiyuk specific, I feel like, just because the GM, Adam Peters, was part of drafting Brandon Aiyuk, came from San Francisco. So there's a familiarity there. And then Brandon Ayuk's best friend is his old college teammate, Jaden Daniels, who's now the quarterback there. He's been hanging out with him this offseason. So that's kind of the connection there with the Commanders. And Brandon Aiyuk has mentioned those teams as the most likely teams he would probably get traded to. So that probably tells me that those are the teams that have called the 49ers. And the Steelers make more sense of giving a future first because just look at the track record for Mike Tomlin. If things go bad, it's still going to be a pick in the teens, maybe, right? They're going to be a 500 team, or with Aiyuk, maybe a little bit better. And maybe they do kind of hit with these veteran quarterbacks that they have in here, whichever one it is, and are a playoff team. And so it's a pick in the 20s. So that's why I could see it for the Steelers, but it'd also be like, I think the 49ers would for sure have to be getting and asking for first round value, whether that's picks, players, whatever it is coming back. And if you're Washington, is it worth it to send Terry McLaurin and a pick? You might as well just keep Terry McLaurin, who's got a better contract anyway.
So this brings me to another topic. So 3 of the teams led by Washington, but also the Raiders, and I've heard Broncos. I mean, I'm sure Peyton would love Aiyuk. But I think if the Broncos, Raiders, or Commanders were to make that trade, another shoe would drop. And McLaurin, Adams, Sutton might not go to the Niners. They may end up in Pittsburgh, but I think they would get moved.
What about Brandon Aiyuk for Davante Adams?
I don't know why you'd do that. I mean, he's awesome.
To win a Super Bowl.
Right. Winning Super Bowl sounds pretty good, right?
And you could still do things in the future. And I think the youth of the 49ers would prefer the youth of Aiyuk, right? Because I don't think they want to get older at wide receiver.
Sure.
But,
but they drafted one in the first round.
You could probably hang out, maybe restructure Davante Adams, help out your cap in 2025, keep him around an extra year with Debo, and then Pearsall, and then eventually you've got Pearsall and Debo or Pearsall and Adams or something like that. Like I could see something like that happening for the 49ers, but you're right. I feel like one domino would change a lot. If it's Denver, then all of a sudden Sutton's on the move. If it's Washington, then obviously one of the receivers has to go somewhere. Maybe Washington trades a pick for Brandon Aiyuk. Well, now Dotson or McLaurin are on the move to a third team instead of to the 49ers, who did draft a first rounder in Ricky Pearsall. And so, there is a little bit of a domino effect that I think could happen if there was a big time trade of either Brandon Aiyuk or someone like Davante Adams.
So I think you could definitely make the argument that Denver, Vegas, and Washington, by the time they're good, Adams, Sutton, and McLaurin won't be. They'll help you get better, but then I got to go find a receiver. I'm not sure they're part of the long-term plan.
Yeah, and Aiyuk is still only 26, so he helps now. And you're dreaming. They're like, man, maybe he's even better when he does get that volume. Like, imagine if, here's the thing. So swap CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Aiyuk, and Brandon Aiyuk gets 180 targets. You know what I mean? Like, what would that look like? He'd probably have already signed a contract in the $30 million per year.
Yep. 2 outside ones that I want to throw out there. I've heard people mention the Jets are all in. Wilson's not super expensive. Do they care about future first? Maybe not. I mean, let's make Aaron happy and really go at it heavy. And the Bills, but I feel like the Bills are rebuilding and getting young and want to see how it looks 1 year removed, Do
the Bills want to be cheap at wide receiver, or did they just not want to have Stephon Diggs around anymore? That would be my question. And they did so many trades during the draft that I think they had a lot of phone calls and conversations. I wonder if that was a team that was like, okay, well, let's get younger but stay veteran. And cap wise, they're not in a place like maybe the Steelers are, but
right.
They figure out a long-term deal for somebody like Brandon Aiyuk where they didn't want to pay Stephon Diggs anymore. Is that a possibility? I think the Bills are an interesting team for sure.
Yeah, they are. I feel like this is just phase 2 of the Allen era, but they might have just realized we didn't think Aiyuk was even an option, whenever we made our offseason plan, and he is, and we might win the Super Bowl with him this year. So we'll give you our first round pick.
So probably a first round pick that's not likely to be top half of the first round is probably the Aiyuk market in trade?
I
That's
think
what
there's a
think.
little bit of Niners homerism there from you, but I think that's exactly the way I would look at it.
Or that would be
And when
the ask. At least someone says, "Hey,
at
we
least
want to
the
trade,"
ask, yes.
and if he and John Lynch would say, "Well, if you're not bringing a first round pick, we're not even continuing this conversation." That would be kind of how it would go.
Yeah, I tend to think so too.
Davante
And
Adams,
that's fair.
Davante Adams might be cheaper, even though he's been an amazing player.
See, that's what I keep harping on in my Steeler audience is I want the next guy, I think. Like Aiyuk for the Steelers first, I'm all ears. But Davante Adams for their second, or McLaurin for their third, or Sutton for their fourth, that's more my style, and keep that first.
Yeah. McLaurin's I don't even know what the market
I'd love to
would
get
be for
McLaurin for the Steelers.
Washington fans think he's as good as Aiyuk already. So they were out of their minds thinking that they would even think about including McLaurin in a trade for Brandon Aiyuk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if a player would go back to the Niners at all.
They've already drafted a first round like that. I think that's
maybe
the thing.
An O-lineman.
An Aiyuk trade with a wide receiver coming back, that was a pre-draft move. So maybe there's an offensive lineman. Nobody has extra offensive linemen.
Yeah. Right. Like we joke on the air, like, well, we'll throw Dan Moore in from the Steelers. Like, that's fine. I mean, he's not going to make the deal one way or another, like bad left tackle.
So I think Davante Adams, Brandon Aiyuk, odds unlikely that either is traded. If they are traded, is there one team that stands out as the best fit for those guys? Pittsburgh for Aiyuk, New York Jets for Adams.
Yeah. I don't know. It maybe I'm making this up, but I think some of the Schefter-ish people in the world have predicted a well-known receiver will move before opening day. I mean, I hear a lot of that from insiders,
Adams could be a trade deadline guy too.
Oh, a lot of these guys could be trade deadline guys. Even like a Godwin or a Lockett or somebody like that too,
Yeah,
right?
Lockett's interesting. It's funny because we're going to talk about Quinn Meinerz and his new contract. And there's more teams with extra wide receivers than there are extra offensive linemen.
Oh, yeah.
That's why offensive line contracts are going up, especially the interior guys, just as fast as wide receiver contracts right now. So let's get into that one next. Quinn Meinerz getting paid, and Matt's top 5 defensive players in the NFL. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn isn't just some regular old job board, because there are professionals at LinkedIn that you cannot find anywhere else. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find, like those that aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role, your role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Am I seeing this right? Quinn Meinerz, guard, getting 4 years, $80 million, $20 mil per for interior offensive lineman, Matt. Business is good, obviously, but every position is a premium position now.
It's getting that way, isn't it? So let's look at Sean Payton's history. I mean, a lot of it's because he had Drew Brees, a smaller quarterback, but they invested in guards and centers in New Orleans like nobody else. He gets to Denver, and he gives McGlinchey a huge contract. He gives Ben Powers a huge contract. Like, he invests in linemen that mash you. And people might be like, Quinn Meinerz, like, I remember him. He's a guy that didn't have a shirt or had the stomach out and blah, blah, blah.
Small school guy at the Senior Bowl.
Right. He's cute. That's funny. He's one of the best young guards in the league. Like, if I were building a team, he may be one of my top 2 or 3 choices at guard if you consider age. So in terms of value in the guard market, he's absolutely worth it. I mean, do you want a team build by investing in $20 million guards? That's a different conversation. But if you are, he's one of the ones you should. And there aren't that many bright spots, big picture on the Denver roster, but he's certainly one of them. Him and Surtain and hopefully the quarterback and,
When I first saw that, and I still think we'll see what the true numbers are of this deal.
Yeah.
I'd be kind of surprised if it's really $20 million per year. I still just can't wrap my head around it. So I went to overthecap.com just to see how many guards are actually getting that much money. So I remember a couple of guards getting like 18 mil in the offseason. Yeah. Like that's still really good money for interior offensive linemen. So average money per year, according to overthecap.com, Chris Lidstrom, 20.5 million, Robert Hunt, 20 million. They've got it by left and right guard. So that's the right guard spot. The next is Zach Martin, whose deal was a while ago, 18. I think he was previously the leading per year.
Wants a bump.
Yeah. 18.425 for Zach Martin. And then the left guards are Landon Dickerson leads the way with $21 million per year on his recent contract. And Quentin Nelson, who's long been thought of as the best guard in the NFL, $20 million per year. So I guess top of the market money right now for a guard is $20 million per year.
Yeah. I mean, just you mentioned Hunt, but just looking at what Carolina spent on guards, what the Rams spent on guards, none of whom, in my opinion, are as good as Meinerz. It's a budding market. I mean, it's a flourishing market to say the least.
And Joe Thuney's making $16 million per. That wasn't that long ago that he signed his deal. So it's gone up quite a bit, even just in the last 2 off seasons.
Yeah, in a big way.
This offseason, like wide receivers have been a couple years coming, but guards even this year has gone up a lot. So if you signed your guard 2 years ago, you're probably feeling a lot better than if you got to sign them right now.
Yep, 100%. And I think people want to run the ball versus lighter boxes against these two high shells and zone defenses, you know?
Really, really good player though, Quinn Meinerz. And so with offensive linemen, you're not drafting them on your fantasy team, so it's hard to always know who's good, and they're not household names. And so it's really cool to see the guys get the recognition, especially small school guy like him who didn't play because of COVID. That was the COVID off season, and went to the Senior Bowl and made so much. He could have been just an undrafted guy. He could have been. He went from flat. Maybe you sneak onto an NFL roster guy too. He just signed a deal worth $20 million per year.
Yeah, he's become a really good technician. He's very athletic. He's nasty. He's got a good body type for it. He's a really good player.
So there's been a few players to get in some trouble this offseason, which happens every offseason. Joey Bag of Donuts asked, how closely do teams keep tabs on players during the dead period between OTAs and camp?
It's tough because these are grown men and you can't babysit them.
You shouldn't have to, first of all.
You shouldn't have to. I mean, they have a lot on the line as well. And I will say GMs and coaches don't sleep as well during this vacation time as most. I mean, they're just worried they're going to get that call at 3 a.m, and it's just never good. I will say, I mean, like, I know I always bring back the Steelers, but like Cam Hayward wasn't at OTAs, but Tomlin and Hayward were texting every day, just like they always do. You know what I mean? Like they develop some friendships too, or, hey, how's it going? It's not like you just fall off the planet nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some trust involved there, and some guys maybe you trust less, and you're like, this guy, hey, and everybody knows, it's like, hey, take an Uber. We call the team. We've got services, and yet you'll find someone driving, drinking and driving late at night. It's like you can't help everyone, especially you get young millionaires in their early 20s.
Yep, 100%.
Crime Dog says, hey guys. Hey, Matt, who are your top 5 defenses going into 2024? And I know you kind of read this as
I read it wrong.
Players. Yeah. So sorry, Crime Dog. We're going to change your question a little bit. Matt, who are your top 5 defensive players right now?
Yeah, this might be a longer discussion, but when I read this, I immediately thought, I believe there are 5 elite edge rushers on the planet right now. I think Bosa, Parsons, Garrett, Watt, and Crosby's number 5 for me. So if that's our starting off point, what positions have a player that could knock one of those guys out of the top 5? I don't think there's a safety on the planet you could say is better than those 5 edge rushers. I don't think there's a corner. I mean, with all respect to Sauce Gardner and Surtain and those guys, I'm taking Max Crosby.
Yeah, I'm taking all 5 over those top corners.
Over all the
guys are good, and you should have them on the list of competition for being that.
Yep. And off the ball linebacker, there's one. Roquan's great, but Warner sure could be in the top 5. Maybe he could be 1. Maybe he could be 5, but he could make a strong case. I don't think any other edge guys can. And I think that there's a handful of interior D linemen. Chris Jones could be that guy.
Mhm.
I really think Dexter Lawrence could be that guy. Maybe it's a little rich for Quinn Williams. Aaron Donald would have been probably still in the mix.
Yeah.
But it's a real short list is when you come to that conclusion. If you just start with these 5, knock them off the Mount Rushmore.
Get there eventually.
What's that?
Could Carter in Philly kind of get there eventually, but still he's not there yet.
Mm-hmm. The D tackle group is really good.
Yeah.
But other than Warner, it's D linemen.
It reminds me of, because we're talking some contracts and different things today. And I think tight end, because of what they can do, what they're asked to do, block, catch, just cheat codes on third downs, having a great tight end and having a great off-ball linebacker is really valuable.
Yeah.
And both position groups haven't gotten paid like some other position groups.
I think it's coming.
And I think part of it's because there's so few players that are like, you're not going to pay a lot for the second tier of guys.
No, but you will for Roquan.
But at guard, you might be like, man, I'll still pay this guard, even though he's not Quentin Nelson.
I can win with him. Yeah.
Wide receiver, you can pay a lot for a lot of guys. You use them how you want. But if you're a linebacker who can't cover, I don't want to pay you any money, let alone all the money. Right. And so that's kind of where Fred Warner's value is, like, man, what this guy can do versus run and pass, and how teams really are just crushing defenses over the middle of the field. When you can be that guy, it is super valuable.
No doubt. And this is probably a whole podcast in itself, but a big term I've been throwing out there that should stick is attacking linebackers. I think with all the too high shells, and Shanahan does it better than anyone, you have to attack linebackers, because I think there is a shortage. I think there's a lot of teams playing with cutting, like the Eagles, just cut corner at linebacker, and but you can, if you're not going to go deep, I'm going to attack the middle of the field. I'm going to attack off the ball linebackers. Like the Steelers are a perfect example. They have not really spent at linebacker since Ryan Shazier's injury, and in this whole stretch, they've been in the bottom of the league in nickel. They're either in dime or they're in base. So you're either really heavy or really light. Well, I think this year they finally realized, they spent some money last year on Holcomb and Roberts, who are fine. But then they go spend money on Queen, and then Peyton Wilson falls in their lap. Like, all of a sudden, we're going to go nickel. So the teams, and that's the beauty of Warner, is I can live in nickel without subbing. I don't want to be too heavy. I don't want to be too light. You know what I mean? Absolutely. Two linebackers on the field I trust all the time.
And it's hard to find those players, and the Steelers are a good example. They drafted a linebacker really high that runs 4.4.
Exactly. Right.
Even though he's fast, that didn't mean
bust all the time.
Right. Yeah. And the hit rate's not great. So
analytics would tell you don't trade up for an off the ball linebacker.
Tough, but you got to be athletic, and there's not that many of those guys. And in the college game's not really giving the NFL.
No, there's a shortage. So if you can get an every down linebacker, that almost is the cutoff point. And if I can have 2 of them, like this, the Niners have had them like our whole life, Bowman and Willis, and et cetera, et cetera. Greenlaw, so if I can have 2 and I can live in nickel, the Bills are a great example. The Bills live in nickel because they had Milano and Edmonds. I mean, that's phenomenal. I don't want to be too light and get run on. I don't want to be too heavy and get thrown on.
All right. Appreciate all the questions. I know there's some folks I wanted to get to. We didn't have time on YouTube that were commenting on our tiered lists. So keep those questions coming. We'll probably address some more of those. We got running back tiers. We got wide receiver tiers. Which wide receiver groups, team by team, are the best and worst in the NFL? Those episodes coming up here on Peacock and Williamson. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts.